Welcome back, everybody. Derrick Soo, your 2022 Oakland mayoral candidate. Well, this is part 2 of my qualifications for a City of Oakland mayor. And a lot of you folks have been saying, well, what makes you better than the current candidates that are out there, such as Council Member Shane Tao, Council Member Lauren Taylor, and also Council Member Trevor Reed. They were elected. Just because they were elected does not mean that they are qualified to become Oakland mayor. So here's more of why you should consider myself, Derrick Soo, for your Oakland mayor in this year 2022's election, November 8th. And number one, I have the experience. I've lived through several recessions dating all the way back to the mid-60s. Went through some of the worst times during the 70s, also worst housing situation of the late 70s into the 80s, and then things started turning around just in front of the 90s. I was living in Alameda at the time when I saw the sudden change and surge in the way housing was being built, sold, and inhabited here. And large numbers of people were moving to the Bay Area because of the high-tech industry, and people were moving away from Cupertino, Mountain View area across the bay to Oakland, where it was cheaper for a lot of the folks that were moving into the area. So job growth is really important. Also, affordable housing is important. But in order to understand affordable housing, you also have to understand the way housing was done here in Oakland back in the early days. In fact, one of the projects that I have for living wages is to restore a portion of Oakland that was taken away and is one of the most divisive elements here in Oakland, and that's the Highway 980. And a lot of folks have, you either really loved the 980 or you really hated it. There were very few people that were in between. I'm one of those families that were affected back in the late 60s because my grandfather on my dad's side of the family, they had a home, which is now Highway 980. How do I remember all the circumstances. They were eminent domain. They received the notice of eminent domain, and because my grandfather and grandmother at the time owned the home outright, and the home was worth a certain amount of money, they needed to buy this tract of land. So anyway, long story short, my family was harmed in the sense that, number one, while they were paid more than what the house was worth, they had to take out an additional loan in order to pay for the home and have a home in Oakland. So they went from a free and clear homeowner in one of Oakland's oldest neighborhoods, and then becoming financially strapped with a mortgage in order to have a home here in Oakland, because the prices of homes had risen. Plus also they lost their low property tax costs, and it changed to the higher rate of the new home. And that was also one of the reasons families like that here in Oakland were being harmed by that eminent domain. And so Prop 13 was created to help seniors stay in their homes rather than being forced out of their homes like they were at the time. And so we need to have affordable housing, create the affordable housing. What I'm proposing is that we approach the government, look for grant money from the Build Back Better legislation, and to build a deck like Salesforce Transit Center across the bay. We deck over the 980. We don't bury it, we don't stop use, because a lot of suggestions have been raised and tossed around over the decades. But building over the top, creating a new community land trust, which moving into the future guarantees a site for a city park, and also restores 20,000, actually 22,000 affordable tiny homes back into neighborhoods that were lost due to the construction and the eminent domain of the Highway 980. And that becomes community land trust, that upper portion. And there's a lot of things that can be done also, because now it affords an opportunity for underground rail station for high-speed rails, also a new BART station running through the downtown to San Francisco. So there are a lot of different options right here. Plus, I'm pitching the floating community, because here's some of the things that a mayor should also consider. We want growth to the city, and right now, unfortunately, because of things that are going on in our economy and the high levels of criminal activity that seem to flood into Oakland, Oakland has become less attractive to outside people, because Oakland is known to be too dangerous of a city. So we have to change that by changing the way that Oakland does business. And the way Oakland does business has harmed a lot of people of color and the minorities. And so all of that has to change, and that change starts when you vote me into office for that change. And we're going to bring new projects to community land trust properties. We have to establish a business, we have to establish shopping, and we need a new destination location, because the destination location that we currently have, the Oakland Coliseum Arena and Oakland Coliseum, is mostly vacant a majority of the time. And that was never a really good revenue source over the decades, and that's why Alameda County didn't want to continue being a landlord in the Coliseum, and so they sold their portion. But we need to change that. We need to create new opportunities, and what I'm suggesting is, like Las Vegas, they have an area referred to as Fremont Street, where it's a major shopping zone and also a major entertainment draw, so that it's just not one thing or another, it's many things. It's a destination location. Also, I would like to see that same theme going here to the Oakland Coliseum, especially if the A's choose not to stay in the current Coliseum, and then we have only the arena. The arena would stay in a major project like that, but unfortunately, because the age and the issues that surround the old Coliseum, where the A's currently play, that needs to be leveled and a new stadium placed somewhere else. And I had a lot of suggestions early on. A lot of folks disagreed with me, but here it is. Oakland has the Middle Harbor. If they wanted a harbor site, that would have been the place to do it. Oakland's Middle Harbor. Oakland owns that. It's a community land trust, 180 acres of property. And just like AT&T Park was constructed on pilings and decked on top of the water, that same thing could be done in Middle Harbor. And then not only put a new baseball stadium there, but we could also allow and put in a dedicated football stadium and a dedicated new waterfront arena. So we could have all of this inside of Middle Harbor as a project. We just need to move forward and talk about this. I've already been before the Planning Commission on something very similar, but it was another portion, which is the floating community. Those were the cruise ships, and those become a vital part of attracting new residents to Oakland through not only housing, cheap housing and hoteling right there, but also opportunities for low-cost business, for incubating new businesses, new schools, and new opportunities. And with 6 ships, we could house, through a FEMA program, nearly 12,000 individual rooms on board those ships. They can be emergency housing for folks that, like what we've been experiencing here in Northern California. There's a place for those folks to go, and at little and no cost, because they're funded through FEMA. And also, these allow for housing, emergency housing for folks that had fires or their home was deemed unlivable. And that's emergency housing where it's provided very quickly and affordably if there's a cost involved at all. So there's a lot of good things to go with that program. And then also we need to have more security here in Oakland by providing living wage jobs and not minimum wage jobs. The crime will drop because the more opportunities are going to open up for more individuals, and especially for people of color, through education programs and re-education programs. And so I see a lot of need for more hands-on, more union type work in not only the decking across Highway 980, but also the decking that will be needed in Middle Harbor when we move forward with the floating communities. And then also with those floating communities, we're not having the cruise line supply all the business. You know, those are opportunity and sites for Oakland residents and Oakland businesses to take advantage of, to get a premier on the water location, or have a new startup, or even schools, mentorship programs. These are all things that I, as a possible mayor for the city of Oakland, can bring to the city of Oakland. We're going to lower the crime. We'll be addressing all the crime issues. We're already addressing a lot of them because I'm already working with a lot of city departments. We're working at reducing illegal dumping. I've been working very hard dealing with the car thieves and the criminals that have been stripping cars here throughout the city of Oakland. Also working with the police and local law enforcement officers of all the different agencies, pointing out who those characters are and trying to get them off the streets. So I'm very involved. In fact, probably the most involved candidates for Oakland mayor that you're going to come across. I'm an activist. I'm not just a homeless person. The homeless portion actually gives me more insight as to how programs to get homeless people off the streets and what's truly going on the streets. I'm going to cover on the next episode, because it's really shocking why we need to get homeless camps off Oakland streets. We need to develop tiny home villages, pallet shelter villages, and HOAs specifically for our homeless community. And these are for the good, innocent people that were homeowners and renters here in the city of Oakland. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be right back.